Beth Tolley talks about volitional versus autonomic responses. And she says volitional responses are when people are really deliberately doing something to get what they need, but rarely do we see that. And she wrote an article with a wonderful organization, Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint, and they have a fantastic website. And she said most of the behaviors that we see are autonomic, where it's just an activated stress response. It's kind of like this person feels they're in danger and they're just trying to protect themselves with a very visceral, autonomic response, that bottom-up response, which does not respond to a compliance-based approach. She calls it animal-based behaviorism, and she says that has no benefit. In fact, it makes it worse when we continue to try to punish, even restrain or seclude children for having these autonomic responses, because they're freaking out. They're not rational anyway. And let's talk about how that brain works. We can look at the brain on 3 levels. We have our reptilian brain, right? The part of our brain stem, that just keeps the heart pumping and the lungs breathing and just keeps going. But then we have our limbic system, which is like our animal brain. And that's where we have our fight, flight, or freeze responses, where what's called the amygdala is, that where's our emotional memory. And we also have our place in our brain that cools us down. So we have this sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight, flight, or freeze with the amygdala that tells us we're in danger, fills us up with chemicals, and we respond. And then we have the cool down system. They're all in that yellow part. They're all in basically our animal brain. Then our green part of our brain is the smart part of our brain that plans, that thinks things out, that does things deliberately. But guess what? When that limbic system, when that animal brain is triggered, the smart brain goes offline because you're just shut down and trying to respond to save yourself. This worked really well when we were cavemen in the jungle, right? So let's say we're having a great time. We caught an antelope and we're out there roasting the antelope, having fun. The kids are running around, everything's great. We figured out how to use fire, had some tools to kill that antelope. Things are great. But all of a sudden there's a furry thing in the corner, and that furry thing starts getting closer and closer. Like, oh, we never saw one of those. What's that? And then it eats Susie. Uh-oh. Got to get the other kids. Got to run. Somebody's going to try and fight it. And then our yellow part of the brain takes a picture of it. That amygdala is our emotional memory that freezes it and remembers it. And now we're triggered with that fight, flight, or freeze response, and we're doing everything we can to keep ourselves safe and get the kids and respond. And when we're responding, our smart part of the brain goes offline because we got to just be on full force protection for survival. Let's say a couple of weeks later, we're back out at the field, we're hanging out, and we see another furry thing. Well, this time we have a name for it. Ooh, it's a lion. And we're not going to sit around and analyze whether that's the same one as we saw last time. Does it have the same stripes? I don't know. Or do you think it's a relative? No, there's no time for that. You know, we're going to grab our sticks and stones, try and kill it. Everybody else is going to run. Maybe little tiny cavemen's going to play dead because we're the only animal that eats dead animals. We got the Food Network. We got it all hooked up. And you won't get eaten that way. We're going to respond to protect ourselves. And that's how we're wired. But these days, there's not a lot of real lions out there. Doesn't mean we're still not seeing lions. And it doesn't mean the people we support aren't seeing some lions. Just like Dan saw Donna, the program manager, and was sure she was a lion. And he was running, and he was throwing chairs, and he was screaming. And those lions are very real for people. And when they're having that trauma response, they're in that survival mode. And they're not listening to whether or not they're going to lose their soda or what point system they're not going to get points for or whatever it is. That means nothing to them. Only being safe means something to them. So what can we do instead of stopping them, restraining them, doing whatever, we can step back, we can be reassuring, because we have to let that limbic system know, that cool down system, which is the other side of fight, flight, or freeze in the yellow part of the brain, we have to let that system know that they're safe so that the smart brain can come up back online, that they can breathe and relax. I often said with people when I was working at the program, walk with me, talk with me, and get them away from the trigger. Whatever it is that's making you feel unsafe. Sometimes it's because Joe teased you and he said a key word that you thought meant he was going to hurt you, or because you saw something, or because you heard something. Sometimes we don't know, but what we do know is we have to help people to feel safe, get them away from that trigger, calm down, be reassuring, be supportive. Sometimes we have to just give them the space they need as well. Because rushing in for the restraint actually re-traumatizes them, and then what happens is what happened to me, that person doing it becomes unsafe. So now you're on the list of things that are not safe. And you'll be a trigger for that limbic system.